I arrived at the party early and heard my daughter-in-law confess to her best friend, "I'm pregnant with Roberts's baby." They all toasted to celebrate. Then someone asked, "And when are you planning to divorce that fool husband of yours?" I recorded everything. I sent it to one person and left before anyone realized I was there. 15 days later, everyone turned pale when they saw. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me where you're listening to this story from. I'm Alice. I'm 65 years old, and I own a small flower shop in the Oakwood neighborhood. Today is Valerie's birthday, my daughter-in-law. I brought the flower arrangement she ordered thinking I would touch up a few branches so it looked good and then leave. Let the young people have their party. I walked down the narrow hallway that led to a secondary balcony. Out there, the voices were clear, not mixing with the music. I stopped when I heard Valerie's voice, crisp and confident. "I'm pregnant with Roberts's baby." One of her friends laughed softly with a touch of challenge in her voice. "And what about David? When are you going to divorce that fool?" The clinking of glasses. "Cheers." My fingers gripped the handle of the basket. In an instant, I stopped trying to understand. I pulled out my phone. I started recording. Just a few dozen seconds. The faces, the voices, everything. My pulse hammered in my neck, but my mind was strangely clear. I backed into the shadow of a wall of plants, listening as the laughter spread and then faded as another song began. I didn't stay. I stopped the recording. I uploaded the clip directly to cloud storage, marking it as urgent. I forwarded it to an old friend who worked at Mr. Harrison's law firm with a single line, "Save this for me. It's the original." The screen showed "received." I took a deep breath and put the phone back in my purse. I felt as if I had just put a heavy stone exactly in its place. I sent a message to Valerie. "I'm feeling a bit tired. I don't think I can make it. Have fun." The read receipt appeared almost immediately. She sent a sticker and a short message. "Rest up, Mom. Feel better soon. When it's all over, I'll stop by to see you." The same kind words as always, but this time, I didn't reply, and it was in that moment that another plan occurred to me. I went back to the service bar. A girl with a name tag that said Lucy was arranging glasses, deftly opening a bottle of sparkling water. I tapped the bar lightly. "Young lady." Lucy looked up, her dark eyes clear and alert. "If you hear anything important tonight," I said slowly so she would follow me, "record it for me, please. Audio, video, whatever you can. I won't forget it." Lucy looked around, then back at me without asking unnecessary questions. I placed a thin envelope on the stack of napkins, sliding it gently toward her. She didn't touch it right away, just said in a low voice, "Is it dangerous?" "Not at all," I replied. "You just need to do it at the right moment in the right place." Lucy nodded, tucked the envelope into her apron, and very naturally turned back to her work as if nothing had happened. I moved away from the bar, crossing to the metal staircase that went down to the lobby. The wind brought a slight smell of grilled meat. Laughter erupted in waves. At the door, the attendant nodded. "Leaving already, Mrs. Alice? I forgot something at the flower shop," I said, as if that were the only truth of the night. In the elevator, I watched the clip again just once. The phrase, "I'm pregnant with Roberts's baby," fell like a stone in water, dry, cold, creating ripples that spread quickly. I left the rest to the silence. I knew what I had to do. The detailed plan was already forming. The elevator door opened. In the lobby, I paused for a moment. The sound of familiar footsteps. David, my son, was rushing in, holding the bouquet of sunflowers I had prepared for him myself at noon. White shirt, one button undone from the hurry. His face lit up when he saw the "congratulations" sign at the reception. He smiled at someone with the same lightness he had as a child when he ran to the flower shop to ask for a flower for his teacher. I leaned against the stone wall, stepping back into a hidden area. I didn't let him see me. Not now. His voice rang out warm and firm. "Excuse me, I'm heading to the terrace. I'm running a little late." I watched him disappear behind the glass door. The bouquet of yellow sunflowers was like a promise of kindness. I felt a pang in my heart, but I kept my breathing steady. This is for adults. You keep your son away from where everything can break until you have what you need to support him. Before getting into my car, I looked up at the strip of lights gradually turning on over the city. Somewhere on that terrace, the cry of cheers was ringing out again for some trivial reason. Everything was normal, even when something important was breaking. Normality is what makes the confident ones make mistakes. I chose to stay outside that circle of normality, at least until all the pieces revealed what they were hiding. I whispered just to myself, "Son, I have to do this to protect you." Back in Oakwood, I opened the flower shop with the spare key. The smell of marigolds was still strong in the room. Some sunflowers drooped their heads on the shelves. I didn't turn on all the lights. I just left the warm yellow light from the desk lamp enough to see the wooden table. I set down the basket, washed my hands, and opened my phone. The clip was still there, small as a thorn. I replayed the first 3 seconds to be sure of the voice, and then I turned it off. If I told David now, he would fall apart tonight. If I stayed silent, I could build a barrier around him with reason. I sat there, and I saw myself going back years. I was widowed more than 10 years ago, with no man to share the electric and water bills, no one to argue with me about raising my son. David grew up under my care. He is good and he has self-respect. I saw Valerie for the first time at a family gathering. She knew how to choose her words. She knew how to look you in the eye when she said thank you. I used to think she was the one for David. Now I realize her delicacy was like a beautiful coat used to hide something else. I called Mr. Harrison. I made an appointment with him. Harrison's office was on the 2nd floor of an old building uptown. The walls were adorned with diplomas that had faded with the years. He prepared 2 cups of black coffee, pushing one toward me. I put the USB drive on the table and gave him the password to the cloud without adding anything else. He opened the files. He watched them without comment. When he finished, he closed the laptop and was silent for a moment. "What do you want, Alice?" "I want the truth to be put in its place, without humiliating anyone in public, without David collapsing from the shock." "All right, then we'll do it the clean way." He took out a notepad and started writing. "Keep everything quiet. Don't send anything through apps that can lose their trail. Anything new you bring directly to me or my people. Do you need anything else? We need peripheral evidence, repeated conversations, meeting places, receipts, who accompanies whom, and a witness if possible. I can ask Lucy for help, the waitress from yesterday." "Good, but don't let the girl get exposed. We'll use her as a key piece, not as a shield." I nodded. He continued, his voice firm. "Shouldn't you tell David now?" "I know. We will gather enough, and then we will strike once. When we strike, they will have no way to deny it. That's what I want." I left the lawyer's office before 9. The streets of Uptown weren't crowded in the early morning. I walked for a while to calm my heart rate. I called Lucy, arranging to meet at a small cafe near the Arts District when her shift ended. Her voice was low but steady. "Yes, ma'am. Just give me the time." At noon, I returned to the shop. I opened the windows to let in some sun, and then I closed them. David sent me a message. "Have you eaten yet, Mom? I'll stop by tonight." I looked at the screen for a moment and replied, "I'm fine. See you tonight." I didn't let a single word go astray. David stopped by the shop. He brought a bag of pastries. "Get ready, mother and son." We talked about the construction project, about a roof that was waiting for approval. I asked him, "Are you tired?" "The usual. Valerie is busy, probably working overtime this week." I don't blame anyone, of course. I took a sip of tea. Not one extra word. When David left, I checked the locks and wiped down the table. In my mind, 3 objectives lined up clear as 3 ribbons on the wood. Protect David from the shock, gather complete evidence, and when we counterattack, do it only once. Just one. I put down the phone and turned off the lamp. Outside, the small street was already lit up. I said aloud, "Just for me," like a promise sealed with my breath. From now on, every step must be exact. 3 days later, I was in a small cafe on a tree-lined street in the Arts District. The glass door opened onto a street with just the right amount of noise. Lucy arrived on time, her hair pulled back, wearing a white shirt so clean it looked like she had just finished her shift. She placed a thick envelope in front of me and a memory card wrapped in clear tape. I didn't ask right away. We ordered 2 black coffees and sat in silence, letting the sound of spoons against cups pass. "I copied everything here," Lucy said, pushing the memory card toward me. "There's also the piece from that night after Mr. David got up to answer the phone." I nodded. "Tell me the part you heard." She opened her notebook and read verbatim without commentary. "Someone in the group said, 'He's a real idiot.'" Another chimed in, "You're going to be a mom and the baby's father isn't as dumb as he is." There was laughter. They called him too good to the point of being naive. Then they told Valerie not to go soft, that she should choose someone who was useful to her. I didn't interrupt even once. For the rest, Lucy passed me her phone so I could listen to a snippet. The background music was faint, but the words were clear. There was no room to doubt the microphone's good work. I closed the device and handed it back to her. "Thank you." I took out another envelope and placed it on the table. "This is the portion of the tuition I promised you, and a bonus for your work these past 3 days." Lucy didn't open it right away. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, because I know what I have to do." She pressed her lips together and nodded slightly. Before getting up, she added, "I was there and I saw everything. Mr. David doesn't deserve to hear those." "I know." I gripped the handle of my purse, took a deep breath, and thanked her with a gesture. She left the cafe and blended in with the crowd. I stayed a few more minutes checking the table, looking out at the street, and then I put the memory card in the inner pocket of my jacket. At noon, I went to Harrison's office. The room smelled of old paper with the printer in the corner waiting for command. I handed over the memory card, and the USB gave him the password and noted the time for him. He didn't say much. He inserted the card into his computer and opened each file. The screen showed the shaky image from the balcony profiles of faces, crystal glasses, and the phrase that cut like a knife. There was no room for the word mistake. Harrison fast-forwarded to the part where laughter covered everything. He stopped. Clear. He ejected the card and gave me a new USB drive. This is the first backup. I'll keep the second one in the safe. I've already downloaded the one from the cloud to the office's private server. He quickly jotted down a line in his planner. Date, time, source, who delivered it. Good, I said. If you need anything else, just say so. We need the outer circle, the places they meet, who pays how they travel together. He looked at me over his glasses. I recommend someone. Discreet. Leaves no trace. That same afternoon, I met a man named Gibson at a juice stand near the park. He looked to be in his 40s, spoke little, and didn't look around much. He asked me 3 things: the names, routines, and workplaces of those 2 people. I answered with what I knew. He wrote it down with a pencil as neatly as if he were drawing margins. How long will it take? I asked. I don't promise a date. I'll send you the parts as I discover them, he replied. All right, proceed. That night I received the first message, a photo taken in front of a restaurant in the Arts District. Valerie was in profile, her hand touching the elbow of the man named Roberts. The second photo was of the receipt. 2 main courses, a bottle of wine, the time of payment. I forwarded it to Harrison, writing, "First batch." He replied with a single exclamation mark. The next day, it was a series of photos of them crossing an intersection getting into a rideshare car. Gibson attached a screenshot of the trip. The destination was an Airbnb apartment in the downtown Loft District. The apartment code, the time the smart lock opened. No ambiguity, no frills. I wrote in my notebook, date, time, location, license plate amount, who paid. On the 3rd day, he sent a short video. The apartment door opened. Roberts entered first. Valerie followed holding a paper bag. No words. I didn't turn on the sound. I just watched them disappear behind the door frame, and then the door closed. On the screen, time moved forward second by second, like grains of sand falling straight to the bottom of an hourglass. I took everything to Harrison. He organized it into files with unique names. He uploaded it to the office's private storage, printed a catalog, and signed to confirm he had received everything. At this point, they have no way to deny it, he said, but we'll keep gathering more so no one can say you're imagining it. Continue, I replied. I want to know everything, even what I would hate to have to believe. So in the morning, I took a bag of fruit to the construction site on the south side of the city with the excuse that I was passing by to see my son. The site was open under the sun, the rhythmic sound of hammers and saws, the smell of fresh cement mixed with dry dust. David wore his hard hat, his reflective vest dark with sweat on the shoulders. He was bent over checking the steel before the concrete pour, talking briefly with the foreman. Leave the right space. Don't rush. I stood outside the chain-link fence and waved. He saw me, smiled as if he had forgotten his fatigue, and came around the gate. Mom, what are you doing here? He took the bag quickly, looking inside. There's food, too. I was passing by, I said, to see how you work. The work is going well, Mom. This week the column on Axis A gets approved. If all goes well, next month we move to the floor. While eating a piece of guava, he nodded toward the scaffolding area. Valerie sent me a message this morning. She said the morning sickness has lessened. It must be because of the first few months of pregnancy. His eyes lit up. I think we'll tell both families soon. I nodded, keeping my breathing steady. Focus on the work first. Family matters little by little, yes. He wiped his hands on a towel and looked at his watch. I have to get back. Be careful on your way home, Mom. I followed him with my eyes as he returned to the construction floor, the way he bent down to look at the level, the way he signaled to the workers to lower a form. Everything about him was still as direct and patient as when he was in school. Slow, so you don't have to correct. I turned around, keeping my mind away from what I knew. That evening, I prepared the stew he loved so much. Tender corn pork chunks, shredded cabbage lime, and dried chili in separate bowls. David arrived at 7 o'clock sharp. He hung his jacket on the chair, washed his hands, and sat down. I'm starving today, he said, taking the first spoonful, and then sighing. Delicious. How have you seen Valerie lately? I asked as if it were nothing. She's busy. A little tired, but I trust everything is fine. He rested his elbow on the table, glancing out the window. Valerie is very dedicated to her work, but I think everything will work out. I just need to help more with the house chores. Of course. I pushed the plate of limes toward him. Eat. He told me some stories from the job site, a team of workers who argued over a calculation error, a truck of materials that arrived late, but just in time. He spoke with a calm tone. Only when he mentioned Valerie did his eyes show a hint of worry. I nodded, asking just enough questions to make him feel relieved. My hand under the table was shaking slightly. I moved it to pick up my water glass and hide it. After eating, I prepared 2 cups of warm cider and put them in front of him. Are you leaving early tomorrow? Yes. I want to check the forms before the concrete team arrives. He was silent for a moment. Hey, Mom. I think after the approval, I'll invite Valerie out to dinner. Can you make something she likes? Of course. I smiled just enough. You do your part well. He smiled and leaned down to write some messages. When he looked up, he looked at me longer than usual. Do you have something to tell me, Mom? No. Just that today, from outside the site, the sun was very strong. I touched his shoulder. Remember to wear your helmet properly. He nodded as if pulled back to reality. I remember. I'm going home to sleep early. I have to get up before 5 tomorrow. I walked him to the door, watching him walk to the corner, his old backpack hanging from one shoulder. I went inside, washed the dishes, put them away. I went to my room, opened a drawer, and took out a blank sheet of paper. Seeing David like this reaffirmed my decision not to tell him anything yet. He still loved and trusted his wife, working hard to support her. I didn't know how long it would take him to recover if he received that blow now. Late at night, I went out onto the balcony. The city lit up in patches like a map. The wind blew over the roof tiles. The distant sound of cars was constant. I rested my hands on the railing, straightening my back. The phone vibrated. A message from Gibson. I have more photos. Do you want to see them? I looked at the screen long enough to suppress all my reflexes. I wrote, "Send everything to the lawyer. Don't send it to me." He replied, "Understood." After a few seconds, I left the phone on the small balcony table and closed my eyes. I didn't need to know which corner they were on tonight, what glasses they were holding, how they were looking at each other. I already knew more than enough of the things that make the heart want to speak. Lucy sent me a message early in the morning. I have another clip. I met her at a small cafe on Oaxaca Street, sitting at the back table to avoid the sun coming in from the side. She put her phone on the table and played a recording from the night before. Valerie was sitting with a group of friends, stirring a spoon in her cappuccino. Her voice was as calm as if she were discussing her work agenda. "Once I have financial stability, I'm leaving David." "There's no rush," a friend immediately asked. "Has Roberts left his wife yet?" Valerie replied, almost yawning. "He's working on it. I just have to wait." The whole table burst out laughing and changed the subject to a beach trip. I listened until the end. I rewound the 2 questions and answers, and then I turned it off. The cold I felt wasn't from the air conditioning, but the feeling of having touched the core. They saw everything as a timeline, and David was just a milestone along the way. I sent the clip to Harrison right after leaving the cafe. He called me back and said briefly, "Keep the original. I've already downloaded it." At noon, Gibson sent another series of photos. Valerie withdrawing money from an ATM near the apartment in the downtown Loft district, followed by a screenshot of a bank message of a transfer in Roberts's name. A rental invoice showed a clear figure, and the person paying was Valerie. I sent everything to Harrison without comment. At the end of the day, he wrote to me, "Filed in his folder. I've marked it as preparation for trial." That night, Harrison called. His voice was as firm as ever. "We're about to have all the pieces, Alice. A few more days." I stood by the tea counter watching the lamp light up the wooden table. "I'll keep David quiet," I said. "Telling him now would only destroy him." He nodded gently. "Correct. When the cards are shown, it must be done all at once and at the right time." The next morning, I went to Harrison's office uptown. He spread 2 envelopes in front of me. One contained a catalog of evidence, the other was the plan to follow. He explained about the DNA test without beating around the bush. We can do an initial indicative step, not an official test. We just need a hair sample or a personal item from Valerie. A hairbrush is ideal. This result doesn't replace the legal conclusion, but it shows a tendency. If the tendency points to Roberts, we will request an official test before the competent authority when the pregnancy is viable. I nodded. I didn't need long terms. I needed the right tool in the right place. I sent a message to Gibson. "I need a hair from her brush in the apartment." He replied with a "received." In the afternoon, he sent me a photo of a plastic brush on the bathroom shelf and then a sealed nylon envelope with a date and time label. I delivered it to Harrison by hand. He immediately called a trusted lab. He gave them instructions on how to preserve it, and he sealed it in front of me. Every move was precise, leaving no gaps. 3 days later, almost at dusk, I received a call. Harrison spoke slowly so as not to stumble. The preliminary result, remember, indicates a high probability that the baby is not David's. I leaned against the wall, listening to the ticking of the wall clock. I understand, I said. Save everything, he replied. I'm saving it, and I will only say this in a closed room. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote a single line. There is an indication. Do not tell David. I put the pen down. My fingers tensed for a moment, then they relaxed. The next morning, I brought flowers to Harrison's office. We sat facing each other, the wooden table spotless. It's time to plan the lunch, he said. I nodded. We chose a family restaurant in Willow Creek, a private room, sliding glass doors with a projection screen. I suggested it be under the pretext of celebrating David's success so no one would suspect. The guest list included both families, David's boss, and some of his close friends. Harrison added, I will invite a legal assistant to sit at the next table like any other customer. If the situation gets complicated, that person will be a witness. I agreed. When signing the reservation, I said bluntly, I want them to hear the truth at the same time without anyone having time to pretend. Harrison looked at me and nodded. Then we have 15 days to finalize everything. He prepared a file, the mutual agreement divorce petition, the clauses to protect David's assets, the request for an official DNA test when the pregnancy allowed. I reviewed every line, correcting a small word to avoid misunderstanding. No ambiguities. At noon, I stopped by the construction site to bring David a lunchbox. He opened it and smiled. Mom, you made my favorite dish. I just nodded, not mentioning anything about the lunch 15 days later. On the way home, I stopped by the flower shop and prepared some bouquets of marigolds for customers. My hands arranged the flowers steadily, unconsciously, as if counting my heartbeats. The phone vibrated. Gibson reported that he had gotten photos of a new car reservation. Valerie and Roberts had met at a cafe on a busy boulevard and then returned to the apartment. I forwarded it to Harrison, adding only 2 words. New batch. Late at night, I stood by the back window, listening to the neighborhood quiet down. I went over every step in my mind. Maintain silence, consolidate the file, reserve the restaurant room, keep David away from any rumors. There was no room for the desire for revenge. I was just waiting for the right moment for everyone to have to face what they had said and done. The cold inside me was still there, but it was no longer rigid. It had become a straight line where I could place each piece of evidence neatly. 15 days can seem like a long time, but if you know what you're doing, each day has something to fill. The first morning, I went with Mr. Harrison to the family restaurant in Willow Creek. The owner took us to the private room on the second floor. Sliding glass doors, quiet air conditioning, a projection screen already installed at the front. I stood in the center, calculating the distance from the screen to the main table. Where would my family sit? Where would Valerie's Harrison opened his briefcase, connected his projector, and showed a random image to test the brightness? He tested the sound with a background music track. I checked the curtains to see if they let in light when closed. The owner asked if we needed anything else. A side table next to the wall for the files and equipment, I said. He nodded and took note. We did a technical test of the script. Dim the lights, quickly turn on the projector, a volume loud enough to hear, not too loud, so no one could use it as an excuse for chaos. Harrison marked the remote control with a small piece of tape so he wouldn't press the wrong button. I stood behind David's chair where I would sit and practiced a brief gesture to signal the restaurant staff if I needed more water, if I needed them to stop. Everything was kept secret. The surprise blow had to be clean and precise. Upon leaving the restaurant, I stopped by a nearby print shop and ordered some invitations. To celebrate David's new contract, lunchtime casual dress code, please be on time. I wanted everyone to come for a kind reason without smelling the trap. I sent the invitations by courier and hand-delivered some to the most important homes. When I called Robert's mother, I measured each word. Ma'am, this is Alice. There is a family matter that requires the presence of the elders. I urge you to make time to attend the lunch to celebrate David's success. There were a few seconds of silence on the other end, and then she asked, is it something difficult to say? I kept an even tone. There are things that are better heard directly in front of the whole family. She hesitated, then accepted. I knew she cared about her family's reputation. That very thing would keep her seated to see everything through to the end. In the afternoon, I invited David for a walk in Oakwood. We crossed the square. We passed the craft stalls. The smell of roasted corn rose warmly. I told him a story from when his father died, how I had to go to the bank alone to resolve a debt that a neighbor was wrongfully claiming, how I had to take a deep breath and not raise my voice. When you face a storm, I told him, the first thing is to stand firm. At the upcoming lunch, just listen. Don't make any decisions while your heart is still beating fast. and he looked at me a little surprised. "What lunch, Mom? Just to celebrate your work." I smiled. "I want everyone to congratulate you." "Don't worry." He nodded, believing me as always. I felt a mixture of guilt and gratitude for that trust. Harrison took charge of reinforcing the outer circle. He said he would place a legal assistant at the next table as just another customer, tasked with recording the events if any commotion broke out. I agreed. As for Lucy, I sent her an invitation to the lunch, but I asked her to sit in another area, separated by a wall, and to only appear when I called her. "I just need you to be ready to confirm the source of the clip," I told her. "Do not confront anyone directly. Do not argue with anyone." She replied, "Yes, I understand." On the 5th day, Gibson handed me a small dossier, a bound tracking log with clear dates and times, day, time, place, who appeared, who paid, photos of license plates, photos of building names. On the cover it said, "Copy 1 of 3. "Where are the backups?" I asked. "In 3 places," he replied. "My computer, Harrison's office, and a separately rented data storage." I nodded. "Good." He handed me another small sealed envelope. "In case they say the clip is edited, this is the original file from Lucy's machine with a chain of custody document." I thanked him and took it immediately to Harrison. We met at the Uptown office to organize the order in which each piece would appear. Harrison spread the files on the table. I agreed to each point. "I don't want a drama," I said. "I just want them to be forced to face the situation, and then we close the matter." I returned home and made a small list. Who would sit next to David? Who next to me? Who could calm him if he tried to get up and leave? I called Chuck, David's best friend, and asked him to sit next to my son, and if necessary, take him outside for air, and then bring him back. "Don't ask him anything at that moment," I warned him. "Just let him sit." Chuck replied, "I understand, ma'am." I also sent a message to David's boss. "I'm inviting you as a witness. If he needs help with a leave of absence, I ask for your support." He replied immediately, "Don't worry." The following days, I sent the invitations in a staggered manner so as not to draw attention. To anyone who asked, the reason I said the same thing, to celebrate his work. With Valerie's parents, I spoke with due respect. "I want to thank you for supporting the kids. I hope you can come." They accepted delightedly, knowing nothing else. The night before the date, I stood by the window, looking at the silent street. I reviewed every detail in my mind. The tech, the guests, the seating, the witnesses, the files, the exit. There were no loose ends. If they denied it, the projector would turn on. If they shouted, I would remain silent and let Harrison speak. If David wanted to get up, Chuck would take his hand. I went over it again and again until it all became a simple procedure. That morning, before leaving the house, I sent a message to David. "Arrive on time for the lunch, please," he replied. "I'll be early." I looked at the message, and suddenly I felt calm. Not because I believed everything would turn out well, I didn't expect that, but because I had already placed all the barriers so that no one would hit the table. I locked the door, took my briefcase, took a deep breath, and walked out into the bright Willow Creek morning. The 15 days had been filled to the brim. All that was left was to uncover it. I didn't need more courage. I just needed to be on time. I arrived 15 minutes early. The private room was already set. A long table covered with a white tablecloth water pitchers in the center, the chairs placed exactly as in the test. I greeted each person as they entered, keeping my tone warm enough not to arouse suspicion. David's boss sat at the end of the table, nodding politely. Valerie's parents arrived arm in arm, saying the traffic had delayed them a bit. David appeared with a faint smile, his shirt ironed, and gave me a hug. "I'm on time, Mom." I nodded, placing my hand on his back for a second before letting go. Valerie entered after carefully made up, wearing a fitted light-colored dress, walking slowly so all eyes would be on her. Her eyes scanned the room as if looking for the right place for an announcement she already had prepared. Roberts arrived late with beads of sweat on his forehead and sat at the edge of the opposite side of the table, pouring himself water and avoiding looking at anyone. When everyone was seated, I stood up and gently tapped my glass to silence the murmurs. "1 minute, please," I said in a firm voice. "I have some images to remember my daughter-in-law's recent birthday." I added nothing more. I gave a signal. The lights dimmed. The screen lit up. The first image appeared. The rooftop in the city dotted with lights. Valerie was leaning her head, her lips near a friend's ear, speaking in a low but clear voice, with the background music just low enough to hear every word. "I'm pregnant with Robert's baby." A "cheers" resonated with the clinking of glasses, the smiling faces of her friends filling the screen. No one had time to react. I moved to the second fragment. The scene from that night's dinner changed to the moment David stepped out to take a call. A female voice. "He's a real idiot." Another voice chimed in, laughing. You're going to be a mom, and the baby's father isn't as dumb as he is. More laughter. The volume was just right. It didn't drown out the voices of those present, but it was more than enough to suffocate the silence. The end was a series of photos from Gibson. Valerie and Roberts crossing an intersection in the Arts District, entering a restaurant. The receipt with the bill and the time of payment. A screenshot of the rideshare trip that took them to an apartment in the downtown Loft District. The apartment door opening. Roberts entering first, Valerie following. Everything was clearly marked with the time in the corner. I turned off the screen. The room fell into a dense silence. David was rigid, clutching his napkin until it wrinkled. His boss paused. He looked at me with a bewildered expression. Robert's mother covered half her face, blinking rapidly. Valerie's parents lowered their heads. A choked cough escaped the father's throat and died out. Valerie took a deep breath, straightening up as if to remind herself not to tremble. She didn't argue immediately. Roberts looked at the table, his fingers tapping a discordant rhythm. I signaled the staff to turn the lights up to a medium level to prevent anyone from using the darkness as a shield to shout. Mr. Harrison moved his briefcase closer, opened it, and placed a file on the table. With the same calm as in a meeting, he said clearly without raising his voice, "The images and sounds you have just seen have originals chain of custody documents and specific dates. The data is stored on my office server and in a safe. Furthermore, there is an independent witness." He inclined his head toward the door where a middle-aged man at the next table looked at us, nodded slightly, and then turned away. Valerie bit her lip, her eyes searching for an exit. Her father took a deep breath. Maybe this is edited." Harrison's expression didn't change. "I can provide the original files and the data collection process if you wish, but not now. This is not a courtroom." He placed another stack of papers on the table. "I have a mutual agreement divorce petition with clear terms and a proposal for an official DNA test when the pregnancy permits. Before you sign, you can read it." David turned to me, his eyes full of anguish. I placed my hand on his arm. "Just sit," I said in a low voice, just enough for only the two of us to hear. "Let the lawyer answer all the questions." He nodded very slowly, as if pulling his hand away from a blade. Roberts's mother whispered, almost praying, "My son." Roberts swallowed without opening his mouth. Valerie leaned forward, trying to stay calm. "I was drunk that night. I said stupid things for fun." Harrison didn't blink. "And the times you went out together, the apartment in the downtown Loft District, the money transfers." Valerie turned to her parents, searching for their gaze. No one looked up. I looked at the staff to ask for more water, not out of thirst, but so everyone could see that the normal rhythm still had its place. A tray of water was placed. The soft sound of glasses on the table pulled everyone back from the brink of panic. I kept a flat tone. "No one is being humiliated here. We are just reviewing what was said with your own mouths and done with your own hands." David's boss gently touched his shoulder and then withdrew his hand, knowing he shouldn't meddle. Roberts's mother sat up straight and looked at her son. "If that is the truth, you have to take responsibility." Roberts pressed his lips together like someone who just drank a glass of water that was too cold. Valerie was still trying. Maybe it's all a misunderstanding." I didn't answer her. I just looked at Harrison. He took the first sheet from the file and pushed it toward the center of the table. "No one needs to decide right now, but today, the truth is on the table." At that moment, I heard David's breathing slow down. He put down the napkin, no longer wrinkling it. I knew he was using everything he had left to stay seated. I put my palm on the edge of the table, looking for a steady point. Everything was in place. The light, the screen, the words, the papers. There was no room for noise. There was no room for escape. I exhaled evenly and briefly, without taking my eyes off my son. We each in our place waited for the next part of the truth. As soon as the lights came up, no one spoke aloud. I stood up first. I asked for more water for the whole table as if to normalize everyone's breathing, and then I nodded to Mr. Harrison. The air in the room seemed to have closed in around the table. Mr. Harrison opened the file, pulled a pen toward him, and said slowly, avoiding all the difficult words, "I will speak briefly so that everyone understands. You were married under a separation of property agreement. That means what David owned before the marriage and what is in his name is not divided. Infidelity is grounds to end the marriage. We will handle the process correctly, without arguing over assets." He turned the first page and placed it in front of Valerie. "This is the mutual agreement divorce petition. The condition is simple. You do not claim any part of David's assets. Both parties agree to undergo the procedure to determine paternity when the pregnancy allows for the DNA test. I'll let you read it." He slid the paper to the center, uncapped the pen, and then pulled his hand back without applying pressure. Valerie looked at her parents and then at me. I held a calm gaze, saying nothing. Harrison continued explaining like a professor reading instructions. It is not mandatory to sign today, but if you deny everything that has been shown, I will proceed to the next step, filing a petition with the competent authority. The video, the audio, the photos, and the receipts are supporting evidence. There we will only speak of what is in the file. He looked up and met her gaze directly. There will be no defamation, only the truth and the procedure. Valerie's father hunched over his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles turned white. Her mother gently pulled at the edge of a tissue, not daring to look up. Roberts lowered his head even further. His mother placed a hand on his shoulder, not speaking, but her gaze forced him to listen. Harrison took a sealed envelope from his briefcase, a signature crossing the flap. He left it on the table and looked at everyone. This is an indicative result obtained from a validly collected hair sample following the preliminary verification procedure. I repeat, this does not replace the official test. It only shows a tendency. The result registers a high probability that the baby is not David's. He pulled the paper out just enough for everyone to see the summary line and then put it back in the envelope, sealing it again. My suggestion is to schedule an official DNA test once the pregnancy medically permits it. I have already contacted a facility to perform it. Both parties will go with their lawyers. It will be done in a private room. Valerie pressed her lips together, trying to form a sentence. I already said it. I was drunk that night. I said stupid things for fun. And the times we saw each other, a lot of work. We went out to eat to discuss projects. Harrison turned over a screenshot. An Airbnb booking in the downtown Loft District 2 times in 1 month with the note, "Weekend getaway." He didn't ask. He just slid the paper. Valerie looked at the note, her chest rising and falling. She turned to her parents. Things aren't like that. It came out as thin as tissue paper. Roberts leaned back, took a deep breath, and then said in a low voice to his mother, "I'm sorry." His mother nodded once, very slowly. "If the DNA results confirm it, you have to take responsibility, without evasion." Valerie's father cut in quickly. "We can speak in private." Harrison raised his hand. "I am not stopping anyone from speaking in private, but the legal content will be handled with documents. Any stray words from now on are useless." David had been silent the whole time. I watched his hands gradually relax, his knuckles no longer white. He turned to me as if looking for a reference point. Valerie put both hands on the table, trying to save the situation. "We can try. We can wait. I need time." Harrison nodded. "No one is taking the pen from you. I propose 2 steps. 1, read the terms carefully. 2, sign the consent for the official DNA test. I will send the appointment in writing." He placed a consent form for the test on the table, leaving a blank space for the signature. Valerie's father looked up. His voice was hoarse. "Mrs. Alice, could you be more lenient with my daughter?" I looked at him directly, keeping a serene tone. "I have not raised my hand to strike anyone. I have only put the truth on the table. The rest is everyone's own choice." I turned to Harrison and nodded slightly. From here, my job was to remain calm, while the lawyer and the papers did the cutting. Harrison concluded the plan of action, his voice as steady as a clock's ticking. "Today we register. The parties have seen the content presented. They know there is an independent witness. They know the data is securely stored. They know the proposal for the mutual agreement divorce and the official DNA test. If any party denies this, I will immediately file for judicial intervention." No more words. He closed his briefcase and placed the pen on top, as if putting a final stop to the presentation. In the silence, the slight sound of silverware from the next table resonated, as if bringing everyone back to daily life. I took a sip of water. My mouth was dry, but there was no lump in my throat. I turned to Valerie. "I don't hate you. I just won't allow anyone to use my silence to harm my son." The sentence hung over the table with no need to raise my voice. Valerie took out a tissue and dabbed the corner of her eye, though the tears hadn't started to fall. "I will read it, but I won't sign today." Roberts turned his glass, not daring to look up. His mother sighed. Valerie's parents sank a little deeper into their seats. I leaned toward David. "Sign when you're ready." My voice softened, as if placing a hand on a swinging door. David looked at the form in front of him, his fingers trembling slightly. He didn't look at Valerie or Roberts. He looked directly at the blank signature line, and then he set the pen down on the table. I ask for time. Until tomorrow morning." His voice was hoarse but clear. Harrison nodded. "Agreed." He took out a thin sheet of paper. He wrote 3 lines confirming the deadline. He signed. He passed it to Valerie to read, and then handed it to me. Valerie took the paper as if it were a train ticket about to depart, her gaze lost. I stood up and asked the staff to bring some food, not to enjoy it, but so everyone had a normal action to cling to. Small plates were placed. No one touched them, but there was a piece of bread to break a glass of water to hold, and just like that, the room felt less broken. Harrison collected his documents, leaving 2 envelopes, one for Valerie's side, one for Robert's. Inside are the copies of what you need to read and the summons. Any future communication will go through my office. He looked around the table one last time as if to confirm all eyes were open. I said my last line, the one that was mine to say. No one is being humiliated here. Everyone is taking responsibility for their own choices. Then I sat down next to David, my hand still touching his. I felt my heart beating steadily, not from winning or losing, but because everything had followed an order, a clear legal framework, an indicative result on the table, an official DNA test awaiting a signature. There was no dark place left for pretending. Valerie folded the form, put it in the envelope, and stood up first. "I need air," she said, taking a step back. Her parents followed her without looking at each other. Roberts remained seated heavy, as if glued to the chair. His mother replaced his glass and said quietly, "Tomorrow you call the lawyer. We will follow his procedure." He nodded, looking at me for the first time, wanting to say something, but he held back. When the door closed behind them, the room was left with just us and our breathing. David was still looking at the paper he hadn't signed. I didn't rush him. Harrison packed his briefcase, stood up, and said, as if instructing a beginner, "By the end of the day, it doesn't have to be sooner." He nodded to me and left first, leaving an appropriate silence. I sat next to my son, counting to 10 in my head so my blood would return to normal. Outside, the sun had moved past the roof across the street. I knew I had gotten through the hardest part of the lunch, putting the truth in the center without pushing anyone off the edge. The rest was waiting for a signature, waiting for an official test, waiting for one door to close and another to open. I gently squeezed David's hand. He nodded and then let out a long sigh. In that breath, I heard the voice of a man learning to stand firm against a wave that had already passed the shore. Chuck put his hand on my son's shoulder when they left the private room in Willow Creek. I nodded to him in thanks. They left first. I collected the remaining papers and asked the restaurant staff to close the room for a while. In the parking lot, I watched Chuck's truck turn the corner, the turn signal flashing before disappearing under the trees. The phone vibrated, a message from Chuck. I got him home. A few minutes later, another one appeared. He didn't say anything. When he got out of the car, he just said, "I have nothing left to ask." I leaned against my car door and let out a long sigh. I sent a message to Harrison. "Give my son a day." He replied almost immediately, "I've already asked the court to reserve the date. I'll be in touch tomorrow." That night, I didn't turn on the main lights in the house. The kitchen only had the yellow light from the desk lamp. Before showering, I left the phone face down on a towel as if closing a small door. But just as I sat down, the screen lit up. David sent a message. "I'm home," I replied. "I'm here." Half an hour later, he added, "I'll stop by tomorrow to pick up some things." I wrote, "Okay." No more words. I knew any comfort was out of place at that moment. I stayed up late. Habit forced me to get up and tidy the kitchen counter wash, 2 glasses no one touched, and arrange the plates in order. Where there is order, there is air, I told myself out of habit, but without saying it aloud. I pulled a chair to the window, looked at my reflection in the glass, and saw an old woman with her hands on her knees to keep them from shaking. Early in the morning, I woke up before the alarm. The shop opened later than usual. When a regular customer came to buy a bouquet of carnations, I smiled like every other day, wrapping the flowers in brown paper with care. Around noon, David arrived. He stood in the doorway for a moment and then went straight to the small room in the back. I didn't ask him anything. He opened a closet, took out a wooden box, and started taking out a few things. A notebook, a wool sweater, some small photos. He stopped at the wedding photo frame. His hands released each clasp. The glass made a very faint sound. He put the photo in the box and closed the lid. I was standing behind him, keeping enough distance so he wouldn't see me watching. Before leaving, he sent a message, even though he was right there. "We're done here." I didn't know who he was sending it to. Maybe to Valerie, maybe to himself. I didn't ask. As for Valerie, I learned from Harrison that she went to her parents' house right after the lunch. They questioned her, but she didn't cry. She was just stunned. Everything had crumbled too quickly for someone who used to plan her agenda. Roberts, on the other hand, was urged by his family to leave his position at the company to avoid scandal, and he accepted with his head down. That brief news came to me like taps on the table. Enough information without inviting emotions. 2 days later, David and I went to the family courthouse at the agreed time. The hallway smelled of new paper, mixed with a faint smell of human sweat with benches along the walls. Harrison gave us the day's agenda and showed us where to sign in. Valerie arrived a few minutes late, accompanied by her parents. She avoided looking at us. When the court clerk called us, we entered the room. Harrison presented the prepared file, the mutual agreement divorce petition, the clauses to protect the honor of both parties, the prohibition on disseminating more clips or copies outside of official channels, and that all evidence would only serve the competent authority. Valerie took the pen. She read slowly, pausing at the non-dissemination clause. Harrison said concisely, "This is a necessary limit." She signed. David sat with his back straight, his eyes fixed on the tip of the pen, not looking to the side. When the clerk asked if both parties wanted to meet in private for a few minutes, David shook his head. He asked the clerk to relay a message. "I don't need explanations." I looked at my hands on my lap and saw that my veins had calmed down. That afternoon, David submitted a request to his boss for a transfer to Chicago. He called me, his voice firm. "I support him. He can take 2 weeks of paid vacation. When he's ready, he can go." I thanked him. After hanging up, I stood in the middle of the shop, surrounded by flower arrangements that hadn't sold over the weekend. I cleared out some wilted bouquets, cut the stems, and put them in a bucket of cold water. I put on an old song I used to listen to this time of year, not to be happy, but to keep the rhythm. My hands held the shears with familiarity, the blades opening and closing evenly, as if training a muscle I had used for many years. Patience. That night I collected Valerie's remaining things in a small bag, a silk scarf she had forgotten on a chair, some thin leather gloves, a book with her name written in it. I put it in a brown paper bag, sealed it, wrote her parents' address, and called a courier service to pick it up. I didn't write a note. I didn't send a message. Someday, if she opens it, she'll know that some things can be returned and others cannot. The next morning, Harrison sent me a message. "Valerie's side accepts the date for the official DNA test when the pregnancy permits. All procedures will be handled discreetly." I sat in a chair, leaned back, and sighed softly. "That's enough. The rest let time do its work." That message was like flipping a switch that had been hanging over my head. I cleaned the windowsill, wiped away the dust, and put out a new vase of flowers, yellow marigolds, and some eucalyptus branches. The night before David left, I prepared a simple dinner. We ate little, mostly just sitting across from each other. At the end of the meal, he said, "I don't hate anyone. I'm just not there anymore." I nodded. "That's enough," he added. "I can come back to visit on weekends if the project allows." "The door is always open," I told him. He smiled faintly. As he left, he hugged me longer than usual. His shoulders had thinned a bit, but the smell of sunshine was still on his clothes. The day he left, I stood at the door and watched the company car pick him up. Chuck was in the front seat and waved. I waved back. When the car turned the corner, the street fell silent. I went inside, made a pot of coffee, opened my notebook, and crossed off some completed tasks. Below, I wrote in small letters, "It's not about winning, it's about finishing." At noon, I opened the back door to let the wind in. On the other side of the wall, the neighbors were repairing their roof. The sound of hammers was rhythmic. I sat at the small table and called Harrison. He said he had completed the remaining paperwork, sent the test date, and notified the parties not to communicate outside of work matters. "We will maintain silence," he said, "until it's necessary to speak." I nodded. Before hanging up, I thanked him for his thoroughness. He laughed softly. "There's no other way." In the afternoon, a customer ordered a piece for a baptism. I chose pale roses, mixed them with small leaves, and wrapped them in craft paper. As I tied the string, I felt my hands lighten, not because the matter was resolved. That would take time, but I knew I had done my part to the end, getting my son to the other side without throwing stones at anyone in the river. In the evening, I put water onto heat and opened the window to let the wind in. The phone lit up, a brief message from Harrison with the confirmation of the test appointment, the red seal of the authority. I read it carefully, saved it, and turned off the screen. I put the kettle on the stove, listening to the water slowly boil and then evaporate. I stood for a long time, my hands resting on the cold windowsill. There were no pending questions in my head. There were things that would come in their own time, the test, the judgment, the day of the break. And there were things I had decided not to carry with me, unnecessary explanations, resentment. When night fell completely, I turned off some lights, leaving only a small lamp in a corner. The golden light embraced the new vase of flowers. I said aloud, just to myself, "From now on, slow is fine, as long as it's straight." Then I pulled up a chair and sat, letting the silence pass through the house like a witness who knows how to keep a secret. A month passed after the lunch in Willow Creek. Every morning I received a brief message from Chicago, leaving for the site at 6. then a photo of the asphalt, damp with dew, the silhouette of a person running sharply in the frame. David said running helped him breathe normally again. At night, he learned to make chilaquiles following a coworker's recipe. He cut the tortillas into pieces, fried them until golden, and mixed them with red sauce and fresh cheese. The first time they were a bit salty, the second time better. He sent me a photo of the hot skillet, writing, "They don't look pretty, but they're edible." I replied, "That's enough." His new colleagues invited him to visit an old church. He stood under the stone vault, raised his camera to photograph the painted ceiling, not the people. One weekend afternoon, they went to a small pastry shop. David chose a corn cake, took a bite, and smiled faintly. Someone asked if he wanted to go somewhere else, but he shook his head. "Next time." I read the message and noticed his words were less rushed. No promises, but not closing himself off to everything like before. His heart had stopped beating so hard. In Oakwood, I started opening the shop earlier. The warm aroma of marigolds reached my wrists as I lifted the vase to place it by the door. I prepared an order for an acquaintance's baptism. I chose pale roses. I interspersed them with some mint leaves for a soft scent. I tied the string with just the right tension, the wrapping paper with no excess. As I wrote the recipient's name, I suddenly felt light. No miracle had occurred. I had simply finished my job, as I had for so many years. Orderly, correct, without flaws. At noon, Lucy stopped by wearing a cap and a backpack. She waited on the porch for me to finish arranging a new bouquet before coming in. "I already paid my tuition," she said, handing me the receipt folded in 4, as if afraid of wrinkling it. I put it in a drawer without looking closely and gave her a brief hug. "Hold on to your integrity, child. Don't let anyone tell you you're a meddler. Do the right thing at the right place and time." She nodded. "I'm still at the same restaurant, but I've cut back my shifts so I can study more." I told her if she needed anything, she just had to stop by. The shop will always have an empty table for someone who still believes in telling the truth. At dusk, Harrison called. He reported that the DNA test date was confirmed and the legal divorce proceedings were complete. Both parties agreed not to disturb each other, nor to disseminate any images or audio outside the scope of the authorities. "I will stay on this until we're done with the test," he said. I leaned back in the wooden chair watching the last light of day slide across the table. "Thank you for keeping everything in its place," I replied. He laughed softly, the sound of rustling papers in the background. "A clean case is the profession's reward." Over the weekend, David came to visit. He got out of the car, stood on the corner, and greeted the neighbors as usual. I prepared water and left out a bowl of fruit. We didn't mention Willow Creek. We didn't mention the lab. After eating, we walked through the neighborhood. In Oakwood, in the late afternoon, you could hear the sound of a guitar in the distance without a clear melody. I told him a very old story. The day his father died, I stood on the balcony holding the letter from the hospital without crying. I just looked at my hands and told myself I couldn't tremble yet. "Justice is not a shout," I told him when we stopped in front of an old tree. "It's the silence at the right time. If you can keep silent, then you can hear what you really want." David looked up at the tree branches and nodded. "I hear it now." For the first time, I felt like I could fill my lungs with air. That night, he swept the patio, just like when he lived at home. I was in the kitchen preparing a small pot of water, listening to the sound of the broom on the tiles. Those sounds were so normal, they brought peace. I put some things Valerie had returned by courier into an old closet without opening them. They were the closed part of a box. I didn't need to touch them anymore. At night, David lay down on the sofa, covered himself with a thin blanket, and breathed evenly. I was sitting at the table reviewing my notebook. The marks I had made each day were like lines, keeping me from turning the page too quickly. At the bottom of the page, I added a line. "Tomorrow, I'll take him to the bus station," without saying much. Just a hug. I closed the notebook and turned off the light. The house smelled of dried flowers and soap, quiet enough to sleep. On Sunday morning, we walked to the small market, bought some avocados and onions. An old vendor lady asked David where he was living now. He replied, "Chicago," in a firm voice without giving explanations. The old lady smiled. "It's cool there." We smiled too. On the way home, my phone vibrated. Harrison sent me a summary of the appointment. "Daytime private room parties present." I just replied, "Understood." The pending tasks already had a schedule. No more words were needed. In the afternoon, we sat in front of the shop. I adjusted the vase of marigolds. David rested his elbows and watched the cars go by. The sunset tinted the old rooftops orange, leaving thin streaks of light on the edges of the walls. I felt that life owed me no other apology. It paid me by letting everything return to its place. My son had gotten up. My house was lit. The flower bouquets were reaching the right people. At closing time, I turned on the yellow light. The light embraced the wall. The flower petals were visible with every vein. David turned to look at me and smiled calmly. "I'm going to be okay." I nodded without asking when. Well-being doesn't have a schedule. It's the way a person ties their shoelaces before walking out the door. I walked him to the corner. The car was waiting. Chuck rolled down the window and waved. David hugged me. Not tightly, but enough for both of us to know the old path had ended. The car left the sound of the engine fading. I stood in front of the shop looking through the glass and saw my reflection bending to adjust a branch. I thought about the past days, about the decisions placed on the table, about the signatures that had closed a chapter. There was no applause for an orderly ending, just a sentence which I kept for myself, but which I would be willing to say if anyone asked. In the midst of the city's noise, the truth is still what resonates the most, when you know how to wait for the right moment to raise your voice. I started teaching flower arranging classes on Thursday afternoons in a small cultural center near the market. There wasn't a flashy sign, just a simple room with whitewashed walls and a few dark wooden tables. The people who came were very diverse. A seamstress who was laid off because her workshop closed, a student new to the city who still got lost, a taxi driver on leave for a bad back. I introduced them to the humblest flowers, marigolds, eucalyptus, some leafy branches I asked for from the neighbors' gardens. I told them the first thing I learned after many years. Before you place a flower, clean the table. Before you speak, clean your heart. They laughed, thinking I was joking, but when their hands touched the shears, they all understood a little. With a clean table, the flowers stand firm. With a peaceful heart, words don't wound. One rainy afternoon, a girl arrived late to class, her clothes soaked. She put 3 loose flowers on the table, saying it was all she had because she was saving money. I gave her 2 leafy branches for free and told her, "A vase of flowers doesn't need much, it needs just enough." She arranged them very slowly, her gaze fixed on the empty space. At the end of class, she took the vase, turned around and said, "It turns out the empty space is what decides everything." I nodded. Many things in life are like that, leaving space to breathe, for others to place their truth, for you to let go of what you're holding too tightly. An old man used to come sit in the doorway to watch us arrange flowers. On dry days, he would tell stories of how the dry trees would sprout leaves again after the rainy season. One day he asked me, "Is forgiving forgetting?" I shook my head. Forgiving is accepting that you are no longer going to collect that debt, but still noting in the book that the debt existed. Forgetting is easy because it avoids the work. Remembering without resentment is the hard part because it requires strength. He fell silent, rubbed his hands together, and said that then he would practice remembering the right way. I took a small bouquet of flowers to the neighborhood health center every weekend. The nurse told me the children liked the color yellow, that as soon as they saw the flowers, they stopped crying. I watched the small hands grasping the stems and felt my heart soften like earth after the rain. I didn't explain to anyone why I liked that yellow color so much. I just knew that when I left the vase, the noisy room filled with a little sunshine, and people suddenly spoke more quietly. One day I saw a woman in front of a fruit stand counting her coins over and over. I bought her some oranges and left without telling her my name. On the way home, I thought, people often believe justice is a big scale in the middle of a square, but sometimes it's just a hand that keeps the scale from tipping toward the loud side. Kindness is the same. Don't wait until you have enough. Just do your small part at the right time. During the holidays, the neighborhood set up a community altar, and everyone brought what they had. I put out a vase of freshly cut marigolds without any note. A neighbor put a small candle. A water vendor put a plate of corn tortillas. The boy who always ran around put a clear marble. At dusk, the smell of incense mixed with the flowers, and I suddenly understood something else. Life isn't sustained only by what is clearly right or wrong. It's sustained by how we help each other get over the rough patches. From time to time, my old students would visit me. Some said they had found work. Others said they had been rejected from an interview but weren't discouraged. I told them a trick I still use. Before placing the last branch, take 2 steps back. Too close, you only see the flaws. At the right distance, you see the composition. Life is the same. Step back to see yourself as less big, and the sadness as less full. The story you have just heard is fictional, but every step Alice took, every choice she made, reflects a truth without borders. Justice doesn't only exist in courtrooms, but also in the hearts of mothers who know how to stay calm in the middle of the storm. She didn't seek revenge. She didn't want anyone to suffer more. Alice only chose the truth. She chose to protect her son from the fall, with reason, with the law, and with love. In a world where anger is always easier to unleash than thought, her serenity was a silent victory. She didn't destroy. She reorganized the order. She didn't shout. She acted. And it was that discipline, that faith in justice, that saved David and also saved the part of her own conscience. Perhaps justice sometimes isn't the sound of a gavel in a courtroom, but the sigh of relief in a small flower shop in Oakwood where a mother puts everything back in its place. The characters and events in this story have been altered to protect the real identity of those who might be recognized. The story does not intend to judge, but to remember that revenge does not make us stronger. Only firmness, humanity, and faith in the truth truly set us free. If you have ever chosen silence, not out of fear, but because you believe justice doesn't need to shout to be heard, share this video. Because perhaps somewhere, someone needs a reminder that even in the darkness, a small candle can light the way. And if you want to continue this journey, don't miss our other 2 stories on the screen. Each story is a touch on the deepest part of the human being, where justice, dignity, and redemption meet. Believe me, you won't imagine what you are about to witness. Subscribe to the channel, because here, every story is a reminder. True strength doesn't lie in retaliation, but in how we choose to move forward, even when the world is no longer fair.